Welcome to the Cosmix Innerspace Podcast. I'm Cami K, Innerspace Surfer and Cosmic Creatrix at CamiK.com. Are you ready to launch a business, expand your cosmic consciousness, amp your intuition, or simply celebrate the everyday messiness of being human? Then the Cosmix Innerspace Podcast is for you. Inside each episode, we'll demystify the mystical and provide practical magic for everyday alchemy. We honor an intuitive and spirited lifestyle that elevates and explores life's multidimensional mysteries. Eavesdrop in on conversations with artists and authors, kick-ass creatives, entrepreneurs, and everyday inner space surfers just like you who are diving deep and glowing up in a whole new world. Stay tuned for inner space best practices and sustainable business tools to help you navigate the new now. Let these stories inspire you to cultivate your curiosity, elevate your mindset, and explore your own Cosmix inner space. Let's dive into the show. Hello, friend. Today, I'm sharing information around a topic that we'll explore more deeply in Cosmix Innerspace Camp, my 8-week program running this June and July. Essentially, today's conversation is a mini version of what we'll cover during week 3 of camp, which is our clear week. You got it. We're going to dive deep into your closets, your junk drawers, and underneath the bed and take a real close look at all your stuff and things. I thought it might be more fun to have a friend join me for this conversation. She's also going to be our bonus guest during week 3 of camp. You can find out more information about Innerspace Camp at the end of this episode and in the show notes. Okay, Theresa Winn Lode AKA the Zany Sage is a life coach, author of the book Badass Organizing, a short guide to uncluttering your home, head, and heart, and a junk thrower outer. She is passionate about helping people clear clutter so they can live life with more clarity and joy. She does this both through her writing, speaking, and professional organizing services. Theresa is a Yavapai College alumna, where she also received advanced certification in life coaching. You can find out more about all of her programs and services at theresalode.com. Without further ado, please enjoy my soulful and spirited Sunday morning conversation with Theresa Lode. Hello.
Well, good morning, Cami.
Good
to see you.
I know. So it's a Sunday morning, and thank you for joining me. Theresa and I have been talking about doing this for many, many months, and I'm telling you, man, I think I said it in the email that I sent to you, from mid-March till like now has just been a whirlwind. It's, sometimes life comes at you in these big waves and like little tsunamis kind of hit you. And there was just a wave of stuff. And I was like, oh, I wanted this to go out this next week because I'm trying to share out information about Innerspace Camp. And you're going to be a bonus guest expert with us for Innerspace Camp this summer. And then I looked at the calendar and I was like, oh my God, we're not scheduled yet. So thank you so much for being available at the last minute to hop on here and have a chat on this fine, beautiful Sunday morning.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. It's always delightful to visit with you. I know from the time we met, there was like this click with us.
Yes. So to give the listeners how we met. So I still am currently working full-time at Yavapai College, which I've mentioned many times on the podcast. And Theresa and her kids are alumni and current students in and out. And Theresa also has taught classes and workshops and all kinds of things. And I think we met like in passing in a tent. It was like a welcome day tent was set up, and someone was like,
I think you're right.
Teresa's an alumni and her kids are alumni and she's taught. And I was like, who are you? And you were like, who are you? And I feel like we were like kind of sisters from another lifetime or something. We just instantly felt a connection.
Right. That doesn't happen real often. And when it does, I pay attention to it.
I know, me too. I love it when that happens. So yeah, we chatted and then we went and met, I don't know, for coffee or something. I can't remember. You came up to campus, I think.
Yeah, I think we had lunch or coffee and then our paths have crossed here and there.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was fortunate enough, Theresa does workshops, as we'll get into, and trainings and coaching on decluttering all the things, our spaces, our minds, our hearts, our spirits. And she did a presentation for our Wellness Wednesday group at the college. And I was so knocked out by her content and material. I asked if she wanted to participate in this inner space camp that I'm going to do this summer, because we're going to have a week on clearing out our stuff and things. And so it just made sense to bring her on as an additional guest expert. And I thought, let's have a conversation on the podcast and get to know you better and share you with all the peoples, because I know there's people out there who need what medicine you bring to the party. So yeah. So tell me a bit about your background, where you're from, because I know bits and pieces of things, but I'm so excited to get into it and hear your evolution.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, see if I can talk. I'm a Michigan girl originally, but landed in Montana many years ago, and have I've been married for a very long time. I got 3 adult children now, and I have been a nurse. I've been a teacher. I've been a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I've been a cookie baker. But the thing that I've always come back to is organizing. I think it started for me when I read Cheaper by the Dozen in 5th grade. And that story was a couple of efficiency engineers. They studied ways to make things more. And I remember that, just geeking out on how can I make this more efficient? So, I joke sometimes that means it's a razor's edge between efficiency and a nervous breakdown. So
it's a fine line, right?
It's a fine line at times. But that's what I've always come back to, is the organizing and uncluttering. And I did my coaching training at Yavapai College. I brought in the professional coaching angle to my organizing, because I realized with the work that I was doing with clients, it's like, how do we create sustainable change? And the coaching component really helped me to understand and help my clients understand more what's behind this acquisition obsession. What's going on? Why can't you that sounds really harsh, but people really struggle. I mean, I see the struggles every day. They're overwhelmed by their closets. They can't park in their garage. So I decided to start doing workshops, and I started at Yavapai College, and before COVID, doing my Unclutter Your Life workshop, and then taking a more comprehensive, holistic approach to clutter, namely home, head, heart, and the impact on your health. So
okay, wait, can I jump in and ask before you get too far into that piece of it? Can you tell me, because I'm always so fascinated, and I love that your story, your background is similar to mine in that you haven't done just one thing. But I find that when we look back, there's typically threads that pull through or weave through all of those things. So can you share with me, where did that show up in nursing? Where did that show up in cookie baking? Where did that show up in your other careers? But those threads had to have been there, I'm assuming. So what did that look like back then that continued to point in this direction that you're in now?
Okay, well, first the 5th grade thing, trying to figure out how can I do this.
I never read that book. I never read that book.
It's a great book. And I remember just how can I do things more efficiently? And so nursing, that's such a great question, because before they unleash you on the hospital, you have to do your hands-on work and demonstrate competency before they sick you on patients. So I had the staged setting, with the bed, and we practiced on one another. And the students, we all got a card on the procedures that we needed to do in front of the instructor, and they had their little checklist. And I will never forget coming and doing what I did. I took care of my patient. I did everything that was required on the card. And I remember my instructor sitting there with her mouth agape, seriously. And she looked at me and she said, I have never seen that done so efficiently before. So now that backfired on me a little bit when I was doing my nursing rotation at the Veterans Hospital, because there, you don't be efficient. And I remember I got in trouble once. I took care of my patients. I had all my stuff taken care of, and I was using the opportunity to, I can't remember, do something administrative, and I got scolded.
And what do you mean? Like was it taking too much time, or?
I was done with all my work, and I was making
you were working too efficiently.
I was making the other students not look good.
Oh,
and
right.
Hold it for that.
Isn't that fascinating? Culture. That's a whole separate conversation, right? Like how cultures get these cancerous, toxic kind of behaviors
Oh,
going, and then you're
absolutely.
shamed for doing it the right way.
Right. Yeah. So
Crazy.
that always popped up, when back in my waitressing days, even. Yeah, I mean, it
Yep.
still bugs me if I'm having a cup of coffee and I'm watching somebody's like, your workflow could really be a lot better.
Oh my God, I know. Because I waited tables. I think everyone should have to wait tables. It's like a rite of passage. I think everyone should do. And it's
Yeah.
like the same thing with the waters, right? Like you take the waters and you refill everyone's water in your section, like the whole
Mm-hmm.
section. You refill all the waters at the same time. You don't like run back for onesies and twosies and keep running in and out from the back of the house, right? Like I know I see it too when I'm in restaurants.
Oh yeah, no. Well, that and the proofreading menus, that's a whole other topic.
I knew we were cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, because I've been a writer too, as you know.
Yes.
So that was the cookie baking. To me, it's all about assembly line and efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So I would make, I make my cookie mixes ahead of time. So what that looks like, Ziploc bags sitting out on the counter, 2 cups of flour, your sugar, and just have it all lined out. So when it was time to bake cookies for the coffee shop, I would just grab a mix, and I had a Sharpie marker, add a stick of butter or whatever the ingredients were. And
I wouldn't even think of that.
Yeah.
But I'm not like a huge baker, so that makes sense. But I love it that that's just how your mind works, and you can drop you in any scenario and you're going to look at it through that lens. Like, how do I make this more efficient? How do I make this more productive? How do I put a system or a process in place to make this flow?
Right. Yeah, it's kind of an obsession with me. I say I need to be careful because it can get out of control sometimes.
Well, and you and I, we know that we've done a lot of the deeper work, and that a lot of that comes from chaos in childhood or disorganized homes then, or parents who were a bit all over the place. So,
amen, sister.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like we take that trauma and then it manifests as something different as we go through our own lives. And
you are so absolutely true. Because I grew up in a very chaotic, alcoholic home.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of chaos. So I know that that part of me developed as a response. It has served me well.
Right.
It's a great skill, but I just need to keep a governor on it so I don't end up.
Well, because it is a trauma response, like you said.
Right. To be able to dial it back, to heal that, and move from a healthy
use
energy.
It to serve you instead of disable, right? Or
this drive to I need to.
I know. I have that recovering perfectionist going on, constantly in myself. It's like I'm really, really playing with progress, not perfection, right? Like this podcast is absolutely 100% evidence of I'm just going to start putting things out there. I mean, I'm using a Logitech headset that you normally use in a phone that plugs into my Microsoft Surface. I'm not on a fancy laptop. I don't have a fancy microphone. It's like, this is what I have available to me right now. This is what we're doing. And we'll go from there, right? Because it can disable you. It can just freeze you. We can just get paralyzed and overthink all the little things. So you've figured out how to organize all the things in a way that works for you. Right. And you're able to help others, right? You're able to use that. So that turned into your magic and your medicine and your special gifts that you're able to share with others.
Yeah. And, it's always funny to me because when I walk in somewhere and, like my clients are usually overwhelmed by the time they call a professional organizer, they're like deer in the headlights. And I'm just able to look in and go, okay, well, and they're like, oh my God, that's magic. And I'm like, it's just how I see it. Yeah.
You got the special filter. Just the filter comes down and you see through it and you're able to see all of that.
Kind of crazy, kind of fun.
It's awesome. It's crazy awesome is what it is. I mean, this is where we get our superpowers, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so then, okay, so you did those things. When did you start morphing into this? Was it after you went through your coach training that this is a specialty area that you kind of realized makes sense for you?
Yeah, no, I started doing this way back in Montana when my kids were still at home. It started out with a lot of volunteer work, a lot of volunteer helping, moms that maybe had a new baby and their house was in disorder, or I gathered a team to help a little old lady next door neighbor move from 3,000 square feet into a little 800 square foot apartment.
Wow.
So yeah, I pulled a team together because that was a massive job. So I did a lot of that work. And then I just started putting myself out there on Craigslist and the phone began ringing. So I just started there. And then after doing the coaching training and coming down here, I realized, when you're a bone alone in a business, you really don't have any scalability unless you want to bring on employees, which is
right.
Not super crazy about that model. So it's like, how can I scale this? And that's in between the coaching training that I received and developing the curriculum that I did to teach at Yavapai College on Clutter Your Life. I feel like that's a way better use of my time to be able to inspire people. Because one of the first things I tell people is you are the best organizer you will ever work with because you know how you work. What my job is to help them raise awareness of how to get to that place. Because they are cluttered in their heads and they can't, or, working with people with ADD, ADHD.
Right.
Have a real hard problem.
Well, and I'm assuming you've come across some hoarding situations and some intense. Do you also have resources that you refer people to, counselors or therapists or, other resources that they may need to go to does it ever go there where, people start sharing or having kind of intense moments because that's an intense process to be going through people's stuff with them.
It is a very personal, I call it spiritual work. Because when you're rooting around in somebody's underwear drawer, there's no secrets. It's just
it's vulnerability 101 right there.
It totally is. And that's top of my list is to create a safe space for them to know.
And
that
how do you do that?
By deep listening, doing the coaching skills, listening to them, assuring them, asking, what's your story? What's going on with this? And then I just listen. And now sometimes it's a little bit of a dance because it's like, okay, let's listen, but let's keep moving forward so that when we leave today, the first thing I do when I walk into a situation is say, let's take 3 deep breaths, first of all, if you're comfortable with that. And I want to hear what your intention is. Or if you want to just privately say to yourself, what is your intention? So when we do that, that kind of settles down because usually people are amped up by the time I'm knocking on their door.
Absolutely.
My bag of tricks. And they're like, and I'm like, okay, we're just going to get centered right now. And let's see what the intention is and visualize what we want accomplished. So anyway, I will remind them of what was the vision that we're going to get this closet cleaned out. But if you are fretting over this piece of lint that you've been saving and you're grieving it because your great Aunt Tilly gave it to you.
Right.
We're not going to be able to get much stuff done.
Yes.
So it's a constant.
That's what I'm saying. So it sounds like you're able to set the container, which is, there's not really a better word for it. I hate that word, but you set the space, you set the container, you let them know they're safe, and we are going to do some work here. Like, we're not just going to sit in the story and sit in the mucky muck of it. Like, you called me in because we've got work to do and we're going to move forward.
Exactly. And it's funny because some of my clients, I had one client in Dewey and she was like, yes, boss, because she would get caught up with all these stories. It's like, okay, Helen, it's not her name, but we need to, yes, boss. She was just adorable. Just adorable.
Well, and that's a big, that's a courageous act when someone finally reaches out, right? Like, they reach out, they know they need help, they can't do it on their own. And so, yes, it sounds like you're really able to discern and keep things flowing, yet I guess that's why I asked about the other resources, because, sometimes sometimes I feel like that could be a catalyst then for people to go, oh, okay, I have deeper work to do here beyond this. Like, that's the first phase of doing our inner work, right? Is looking at our stuff, because then that alleviates space in our mind. And so we'll talk more about that when we get into it. I know.
But to answer that question, yes, I do. It's funny. I always say I don't work with hoarders, but then I end up working with a hoarder. The problems really are beyond the scope of what I can do.
Sure.
So I have referred out to a therapist or to an organizer that does have a background in therapy. And I'm not afraid to. I had to fire one client. We had gone through her whole house, and it got so where I saw that my work was actually facilitating her hoarding. So anyway, that was hard, but that was part of my growth as a businesswoman to go, you're easy pay to come here and do this, but I'm not serving you well. And I said,
I love that you shared that, because I've had several people comment that they've listened to a couple of other episodes and they're beginning business owners, or they're in the initiation phases of creating a business and kind of exploring what that is. And they've commented that they love hearing people's stories like this. And I think what you just said there is a good business point of setting boundaries, knowing who your ideal client is and who you are not going to work with, and being firm with that, because like you just said, it can be easy to take that money, right? I remember when I started coaching in like 2005, same thing. I had a fire. So I was like, you're not moving forward and taking action between our calls. I cannot ethically take your money. Like this isn't coaching. I don't know what's going on here, but the part of the piece is action, right? And
exactly.
So setting those boundaries.
I don't want you to. Yeah. Well, and especially, because, you and I we care for people, and it's like, no, you're not going to pay me to be a listening friend.
Right.
Which, and again, that's fine. That has its place in the coaching dialogue. But I found, and part of it is my passion is so deep to help people just get rid of the clutter and not keep rearranging it. So this another little business point that I've learned that I always tell clients, you can't call me and say, hey, will you go organize Uncle Jim for me? I tell them, no, I will not practice non-consensual organizing.
Right?
Once the organizing needs to call me.
Consent is always on the table. Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely. Because you're just going to breed resentment. You want me to come in and organize your wife? Woo. No.
Well, and that's not our job, right? Like, a client is a client, but it's not our job to just, like you said, unsolicitedly go organize everybody's closets and lives and all the things.
You can't give a gift certificate for somebody to go organize. If they want to hire me and you want to pay me for them, that's fine. But this is not like a commodity that you go out and buy a new sweater or something. It's this is a service.
Yes.
And when this what's that saying? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yes.
And I as the teacher might show up, but if the student isn't ready, nobody's going to win out of that.
Yeah. Right. So then tell me how you evolved past Craigslist to developing your program and where the journey has taken you since then. And then we'll get into the goodies of it.
Okay. Well, I've been a writer for forever. Started freelancing, almost 30 years ago, I started freelancing and developed, I've been a humor columnist and started writing feature articles and in the newspaper. So anyway, the writing has always been in the background of whatever I'm doing. And again, that desire to see more sustainable results with my clients. And then realizing with coaching, oh my gosh, I so love the coaching process, the inquiry based that says, you know what you need, you are the expert. So to be able to incorporate that with the organizing was a huge game changer for people. If they could understand what's behind the clutter, what's really going on. So as I developed and started giving little talks on just little, maybe one-off workshops on, preparing for the holidays or getting your office, I've done a lot of organizing for businesses and doing those one-offs. And I was like, I really want to make this more scalable. And that's when I wrote the book, Badass Organizing, a short guide to uncluttering your home, head, and heart.
Yes.
So from that, I just pulled the information for that and proposed a class to Nancy Ostapuk at YC and said, how about this? And so far I've been through 2 sessions of it and got rave reviews from it. And we take it layer by layer into the clutter.
And so a couple of things. One, back to you saying that the writing allowed you to, put more of the information out there, communicate more of the messages, share the medicine further, the reach is further. And what's interesting to me, again, in reflection with my own story, right? My background, I studied broadcast journalism in college, but even before that, since I was in 6th grade, I was like, I'm going to write books. I'm a writer. Like the books are in my head still. They're not out in the world yet, but they will be born, just like this podcast, right?
Right.
But what I love about that and what I think is interesting, and I'm not sure that I've consciously made that connection before is the inquiry and questions, because I'm like, there are a lot of people in the coaching field, whether it's on more of the business marketing side or the kind of work you do, or more specialized or niched things. It is that inquiry process. We're curious and we ask questions, which is why we're drawn to writing and storytelling and those pieces too. So it's fascinating how those threads also make good coaches, because lots of people want to coach and they're not all, awesome at it. Bless their hearts. Yes. I said that phrase. But it is the inquiry, because what you said is the client already has their own answers. Our job as a coach is just to ask the questions, to hold the mirror up and say, did you hear what you just said here? Did you hear this? Let me circle you back to this.
Yes.
And so I didn't quite realize that those, writers or journalists, whether they're a journalist for a newspaper or not, right? You still are asking questions or doing research and asking yourself questions, right? So whether you're asking a question of someone you're writing an article about or a story about or putting in a book, you're asking lots of questions. And so that inquiry piece is so important. And so much information comes through those answers, right?
Oh God, yes.
That's how the story unfolds. And that's what we're getting at when we work with clients, is those deeper layers of the story that are clues to behaviors, right? This is why we behave the way we behave, because these layers in the story.
And I'm sure you've experienced it, Cammie. I mean, I did a little mini coaching session with somebody yesterday. In that moment, and this happens when I'm organizing, just through inquiry, and you'll ask them a question and then the eyes start to well up. And then maybe a tear will trickle down their cheek and they're like, I did not realize that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I need to take a moment. This is a holy moment.
Yes. Yep.
However one regards holiness, to me, that is like a sacred space we have just stepped on. And it's, I just get goosepimply talking about it.
I do too.
It's such a beautiful thing. It's like, yes.
Yeah, it's those little mini breakthroughs, but it's like you're unlocking. I always think of it as like, that's when it's like you can almost in your third eye or cosmically, you can see that gear shift and it clicks into place finally, right? It's like, oh, that's why this thing is this thing. And then it's not pain anymore. It's like it just relieves the pressure. It relieves the tension. It's like when you're getting a massage, right? And they get in that little muscle, little knot that's in there, and it just pops open and it releases, right? Like that's what those moments are kind of like in coaching. Yeah. So awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. And and I get to see that when I'm organizing. It's just really cool. And one of my favorite questions are, tell me about that. What's the story here? What's going on here? I mean, I don't do 3 questions at one time, but that's kind of how I begin my inquiry.
Yes. Okay. And so you started doing these. That was the other thing I was going to say. I knew I had 2 things and I was like, what was the second thing? That's a shout out again to Yavapai College, but to all community colleges. So in my history, I've worked at a smaller, now it's a fairly mid-sized liberal arts college. I worked at, ASU, which is a ginormous behemoth state university, and now working at Yavapai College. And I mean, obviously I love higher education. I've worked in higher education since 2000. But the community college is such a resource, and especially where I am and where you were when I met you, right? In Prescott, Arizona, in northern Arizona, which is a little bit more rural. I mean, we're a hop, skip, and a jump from Phoenix, but it's such a resource for people. And you were teaching in the community ed program, which wasn't even a 4-credit course, right? And so I think there's gifts and resources within community colleges that I wasn't even aware of, right? And I've worked in education and I worked with transfers and whatnot to community colleges over the years, but I don't think I even realized until I was within one how much of a resource and a safe place for people to move on, not just with like courses and curriculum, but like community resources, meeting people like yourself, getting into groups, clubs, organizations, volunteer opportunities. So there's just so many gifts. So I guess just a little plug there for all colleges, whoever's listening, it's a good place. Also too, like if you're on a budget, right? And I with everything that happened, a lot of people are in interesting situations right now. So if people are looking for resources, I guess I just also want to share that a community college is a great place to find amazing expertise like yourself.
Yeah.
On a budget, right? It doesn't have to be.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes people think, well, I don't have money to invest in myself or in my personal development or moving through some of those things. And it's like, where there's a will, there's a way. And a community college is an amazing portal to access beyond, maybe your current situation. So that's my little plug for community.
Oh, I could not agree with you more. I'm hoping to, I think you knew already, we've been transitioning down to Scottsdale, which is where I'm at right now. And I hope to get into the Maricopa community college system.
And that's an amazing community college system. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have wonderful programs. I know tons of people who've gone through various different programs that either led to their bachelor's or additional, lots of art programming and stuff like that. So
fabulous. Yeah.
That'll be a cool place for you to get into.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Spread the word.
Yeah. So let's get into a little bit of your program that you developed. Tell me a little bit about how that all came together, and then the steps that are a part of it. Let us behind the curtain a bit in your organizational genius mind. Broke down these different kind of buckets of content to help people get more organized.
And actually, I thought I should pull up. I do have the one little cheat sheet. So, as I mentioned before, I use a kind of a multi-level approach, starting with the home. And that could be the home, your garage, your business. And, my biggest rule is don't organize clutter. You just need to get rid of it.
Yes.
Just get rid of it. We are suffering from stuffitis. The storage unit industry is the fastest growing section of real estate. So you want to get into investments, get storage units.
Isn't that crazy?
And it's mind-boggling.
And then people don't even know what's in the storage unit, much less their basement, garage, or attics, right?
Right. Most people can't park in their garage. The average cost of a storage unit is $240 a month.
Wow.
So many people, and like you, they just keep paying for it, just keep writing the check or the automatic debit for years.
Wow. And they don't even know. They probably don't. It's not like they're going to revisit their stuff, right? No, or haven't inventoried it.
Exactly. And this is what happens. They'll mention this, their storage unit, and you can just see this.
Oh,
you can just see their energy just kind of go, and then they go back and continue paying the rent on it. Yeah, and our houses have gotten so much bigger since the 1970s. I can't remember what the statistic is, but our homes have gotten like 3 times bigger.
Absolutely.
And we've got more stuff. And
you and I know, right? The stuff is filling that existential void, right here in our hearts, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff is because we're not doing the deeper work. So we're filling it with the stuff, not to mention our society and media and advertising. We want to go down that road, but our society is set up to encourage, entice, and elicit us to buy more stuff, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And you know what? I did look at my little cheat sheet, and I did forget a very, very important key. And this is to all levels of uncluttering. What is your why? Why do you want to get uncluttered? And this isn't just so I can find the remote more easily.
Right.
Some of the questions that I have heard from clients or that I've seen in my class, they get very poignant. One woman reached out to me not too long ago and said, I want to break the genetic hoarding gene in my family.
Yes.
And she shared with me how she had emptied out 3 storage units. And she says, I'm shaking right now doing this. But her why was to get free of this familial burden that she said, I think it was 3 generations of hoarders. That's a why. It's
huge.
So people come over and I feel okay. Well, maybe that could be a component. I mean, the old shame switch is free. Like one lady that I talked to a few weeks ago, she didn't want to let me into her house. I came over to give her a consultation, and she met me at the door and kind of sneaked out of the door. And we sat on the porch, and I was like, hey, let's go take a look. And you could just see, and yes. It was sad.
Well, think about it. I'm so glad you brought this point up, because ancestral trauma is real.
It is truly real.
Most people aren't even consciously aware that that's a thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people who are doing their inner work do understand this, but like, let's think about several generations back. So my grandparents, you and I are close to the same age, if not the same age. Like I'm almost 50. So my grandparents grew up in the Depression era. They wanted to hold on to everything they had because they didn't have. Then my parents, right, wanted to buy because as they started to make more money or more income, and my parents were not. I mean, we were middle class and, you know, my dad worked his butt off for every nickel and dime. Both my parents worked, right? And so they were more maybe of the buying, you know, my mom has some of those traits and characteristics where it's just like, it's that unconscious like dopamine hit. Right? Like I'm going to buy this thing and I'm going to feel better. And it's like, well, maybe let's talk about why you're not feeling so hot in the first place. So you don't have to buy the things, you know, to like keep showing up on the doorstep to get that rush, that hit.
Oh,
and it goes all the way back though, right? Like
absolutely.
If we haven't looked at where that's coming from, then that shame layer is even deeper because people are internalizing it as their own, right? It's just my thing and I don't know why I'm like this or why I do this. And like you said, don't want to let people in my home, can't have family and friends over to enjoy a cup of coffee or tea or a lunch or a dinner. So many layers. So yeah, it is holy work that you're doing with that.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because when you do flip that shame trigger in someone, and this is something that is so important when I work with people, or I coach them. It's like, you know what? I am not bringing any shame. And I encourage other people, don't shame yourself. You need to be loved into wholeness. This is something that needs to be healed.
Yes.
Not something to condemn or to shame.
Absolutely.
It's healing. And the first step is the vulnerability to get it out on the table, to open the door and say, hey, this is my mess.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as we'll get into more, there's a story behind that mess.
Yes.
And then, of course, what you had mentioned, the intergenerational.
It goes deep, right? That's why this isn't like a quick fix, which our society, again, is set up like, give me the pill, give me the 30-day workout program. Like, what do I need to, you know, what can I take to make this happen overnight? And it's like, well, it didn't arise overnight. So it's certainly not going to rectify
unless you inherited a storage unit, and that does happen. You brought it in.
That, right?
Yeah. And so, but back to the my why, that is the first thing that I work with people. What is your why? How is it going to help you feel when you've gotten stuff, when you've cleared the clutter? What is that going to make possible for you by getting rid of it? And then the more emotions they can pull into it, the more they can imagine that wonderful, spacious feeling, that feeling when you walk into an Airbnb and you don't live there and you can just, you just feel good because there's nothing to tidy.
Yes.
It's a good space and it's clean, you know, so I'll throw out suggestions for, you know, think about how that's going to feel.
And what are some of those words, Theresa, that people share with you? What are some of those words that they say they'll feel on the other side of the transformation?
Oh,
help walk them through?
Spacious, empowered, free. They've broken a cycle. Their physical health is going to improve. I don't know how, and this is women mostly, probably because we still do the lion's share of on the domestic scene. The amount of women that, and we'll get into this a little bit later, headaches, fibromyalgia, chronic pain.
Okay,
I'm so cluttered, I can't get the energy together.
Oh, yes.
Deal with the clutter, so my pain levels are worse. So it even brings a physical healing, a physical balm when your environment has been uncluttered and you can breathe easier. It literally makes you feel better physically. It's crazy. It's just,
so it's a ripple.
Crazy,
it's a ripple of
absolutely
unpeeling some layers. Yeah. So the why is where you start, and then
that is where I start. Yeah, and pull in the emotions, and then well, let's go back to the house then. Your house, your garage. So, you know, I wish I had some patented little formula that was, you know, that I could sell and become a millionaire overnight. That's not going to happen. I do the same approach as most organizers do, and we categorize things. Does it need to find a new home? So it needs to go to a different location. I call that the relocate. The donate box is another one. This is stuff that is usable. You know, I'm sorry, that stained, ripped t-shirt that you want to give to Goodwill.
No.
This is don't.
Right.
It's an astonishing amount of that stuff ends up in the dumpster, in the landfills. Yeah. Now, sometimes you can use rags and towels and old bedding for poundage for places that will turn it into rags. So anyway, that's the donate. My favorite one, I should have mentioned this first, is the pitch pile. And I always tell people, I come from a Christian background. So I'm like, it wants to go see Jesus. So let's
send it back.
All of those receipts that you've been hanging on to for the last 30 years, they want to go see Jesus. They've lived their lives. They're ready for their reward. Let's,
And what is it? Total side note about receipts. I hate them. I get them, and even if I have 3 of them in my purse, I tear them up and throw them away. I'm like, why do we even still do this? Anyway. I understand.
I hear you. And I know there's apps for it and whatnot anymore. Like when I'm gassing up, do you want a receipt? No.
No, I don't want your extra piece of paper.
No, I don't.
You go to Walgreens and they're spitting out the coupons and all the things. It takes 5 minutes. I know.
It's 15 feet. And then I'm like, I object to this. I'm not going to shop here anymore. This is ridiculous.
I know.
Yeah.
Isn't it, when I think about some of the systems that are set up in our society, I'm like, why do we do this? Why is this set up like this? And how have we not asked sooner and innovated something better, right?
We've got to do better.
I know, because it's all part of the cycle.
Yeah, it truly is.
I know.
So much insanity. So, that's the pitch pile.
Okay.
And then the last pile is think about. And this one needs to be careful with it, because for some people, they want to think about everything and then you don't get anything done.
Sure.
So things like that might be seasonal items where you're not sure if you're going to use it in the winter again, or, so that's an important, if I see somebody getting really anxious about maybe partying with some little tchotchke that they bought on a vacation 15 years ago, it's kind of like a little bit of a safety valve for them. If I can see them going, oh God, and teary, it's like, we don't have to get rid of that right now. I try to listen to what they're saying. And I have learned, because I have pissed people off before, going, let's throw it out. All right. I need to watch my energy. Then I'm like, yeah, let's throw it out.
Right.
Some of my clients, they'll laugh at me. They're like, you need to throw out something right now, don't you? It's like, I do. My fingers are getting twitchy. So they'll let me throw out a basketball with a hole in it, or
an old invitation to a baby shower. Yeah.
You're not kidding. Some of the stuff that I see is, it's keep my game face on, keep a poker face. It's okay.
Well, because it has importance on some level, right?
And then that's where tell me about that. Is there another way that we can remember your loved one? Because the sentimental stuff, that question does always come up. And the think about box can be used for that. But what I do with clients is is there a different way we can memorialize?
Yes.
Say that right? Your loved one.
Yes.
Instead of hanging on to this, a broken recliner that you can't even sit in.
Right.
Or something else where it causes trouble. It makes them sad. They feel sorrow.
Right.
When they look at, this was Great Aunt Wilma's, and when she died in a car accident, and this was her, whatever. I'm like, let's honor Great Aunt Wilma for a moment. And then how about we pass that on to somebody who could use that maybe, or just free yourself from the sadness.
Right. Well, and back to your point about the broken recliner, if it was Great Aunt Wilma's, right? And then they're not looking at it. It's like, now I have to walk around it and pretend it's not even here, and it's taking up space to flow. I can't get from my living room to my kitchen because I got to go around this big old recliner, so it's like, there's just so much and
they're so used to that pattern.
Yeah.
For me to come in and go, have you considered getting rid of that and freeing up the floor space? And they're like, oh my God, you're a genius.
Because they're not even seeing it anymore, right?
That's why you pay me the big bucks.
Yes.
Yeah, but isn't that we get habituated to these patterns that we're so used to them? It's just like these old cow paths in our brain.
Yes.
Or in our home where we're tolerating, like maybe somebody's got, and I'm not kidding you, 3-4 vacuums. Well, this one doesn't work for this, and the suction thing on this one doesn't work.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh my God, how about this? Get rid of all 4 of them and go get yourself one, or even better, take one to the vacuum shop, get it fixed,
right,
and part with the rest of them.
Yes.
Yeah. But we do. That's what we humans do. We like to think we're so rational, but we're not.
Yes. And so then next, what's next?
So the next one I talk about head. And as you know, we are just way too freaking busy. We're stressed out. We're suffering from insomnia. According to Brene Brown, her brilliant TED Talk, we are the most medicated group of people ever in the history. What's up with that? Our little heads, we're so overloaded with decision fatigue, and that is a very real thing. How do we settle our mind down? Our monkey mind is, I love how the Buddhists call it the monkey mind, because I can just picture these monkeys swimming around.
They're all over. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and I would like to say, I'm going to be the first to confess, I got the monkey shit show going on in my head more often than not.
Which is why you like to clear other people's stuff.
It's like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why it's your own monkeys. Right.
Exactly. Settle down. Okay. You over there. Yes. Set the banana down.
Yes. Yeah.
But how do we do that? So kind of the same procedure that I do: the pitch, donate, relocate, and think about. So for the head, it's a little different. What does the pitch look like? Well, stop doing it. If you're the super volunteer at your church, like I was for many years, or your kids' activities, or you're just doing too much stuff. Pick something and stop doing it. This is so unhelpful to people, because we were not made to be connected 24/7. And again, I'm as bad as the next one. My phone is next to my pillow because I listen to stories or meditation at night. But I know a lot of people, they're just constantly. So stop doing it. Now, that was the digital distraction, but if there's activities that you can pitch.
Right. Well, and also, don't you think that the busy, quote unquote, is similar to filling with stuff, right? We're keeping ourselves busy because we don't want to hear the thoughts that are going to trigger the emotions that we're not wanting to feel, which is the same thing as buying more of the stuff, right? They're tied together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I want to point out something too, where I just say yay to people, because that when those behaviors are numbing and distracting, and I think, you are so brilliant. You are a badass, because you have figured out a pattern to mitigate the pain that you're trying to keep at bay. Now, that's helpful up to a certain extent to get you through that childhood or whatever. It is not helpful, especially by the time you get older. Now you do have chronic health issues knocking at your door. And now you are a shopping addict. And I've seen that too. It's very sad. It's very much an addictive cycle.
Yes.
But at the beginning, it's like, good on you. You figured out something to get you through that time. But now it's time to honor yourself, your true self, and reevaluate how you're doing things.
Yes. And I want to share, full disclosure, I'm 100% guilty of all of that. And I don't want to say guilty because it's not a guilt thing. I mean, again, no shame. I even as far back as high school, I had, gastrointestinal issues. They labeled it IBS back then. I remember going to the doctor when I was like 15 years old, and he was like, the majority of this is stress related. What do what all are you involved in? I was like, well, let's see. I'm an editor on the newspaper. I'm an editor on the yearbook. I'm a captain on the dance team. I'm on the prom committee. I'm on the homecoming committee. I have a boyfriend. I work a part-time job. I'm, a decent student. And he was like, yeah, you're overextending yourself. And I was like, it's all good. I got it handled, and it just it kept snowballing. College was the same. After college, in a lot of my early jobs and whatnot. And that manifested up to, in 2016, I was violently ill from 2016 to 2018. Yeah. For 2 years, they couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was finally diagnosed with Crohn's. Yeah. And part of why I live in Prescott and work at YC was part of the healing process, because I had to undo parts of my life. I was just, I loved my job at ASU, but it was very stressful. It was a stressful environment. It was kind of a startup type environment that I was in. And there was just a lot of layers going on that I wasn't even aware of, as well as the Phoenix environment. Like I didn't even realize I loved living in Phoenix. I was part of, the downtown scene and community before it got so built up, and we were having events and, community dinners and things like that. And then, then Phoenix blew up and it happened. Right. And then it was just like, just to go to the grocery store is stressful. It's like we're all these cars and I got to traffic and park and lots of people. And so I was just like, I didn't even realize until, my health completely went haywire and sideways. And then I was like, oh my God. And my intuition, once I got quiet, right? Well, 2 years of being quiet in your bed, you'll start to hear your intuition come through, right? Or God or source or whatever we call it.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I created all of this, so then also taking responsibility and ownership of like my part in all of this.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like it's a big aha, like, I designed this. Like this didn't just happen. I co-created all of this. And so then it's like, how do we dismantle all of this?
Right.
So yeah, it goes so deep and there's so many layers and it's not conscious until it is, right? Until
it bites you in the butt. Yeah.
And literally, Crohn's, I sat on the toilet for 2 years. The toilet in my bed is where I lived for 2 years.
Right. Yeah. No, I hear you. No, and I still get that thinking in me where I'm like, okay, then I need to do this and then I need to do that and then I drive.
Yes. Well, and what you said too, to the fibromyalgia, the migraines, the headaches, the exhaustion, like all of those symptoms. Oh yeah. That's all of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll get into that more with the health topic. I love that you've jumped into that. With the head clutter. So stop doing some stuff.
Yeah. Just let it go. Yeah.
What about the donate? What does the donate thing look like? I mean, you obviously can't donate, but you certainly can delegate something. Can somebody else do it? Can you outsource it? I mean, there's all sorts of, if you've got a small business, you don't have to do everything. You can outsource some of that. Can you shift it off your plate to somebody else? You got kids at home still. How about they start picking up more of the work? So that would be the donate. The relocate box, how do you organize the head clutter and what do you mean by relocate? There's just different seasons in life. So like, I think I shared with the YC call, my desire to learn Spanish. Doing that when I was homeschooling my kids and I was busy with so many other things, not the best time. But now kids are all grown. I've got time. So it's not a no to the activity. It's not a no to the desire. It's just a different season. So that's the other thing that you can do. And then finally, the think about box for the head. We get stuck with analysis paralysis, decision overload. So what I like to do is put a date on the calendar and set a timeline for it. So now if you're talking about switching brands of toilet paper, you really don't need to give that a lot of time. The toilet talk prompted that. If you're talking about moving across the country, then you might want to set, 6 weeks to consider the information. And that's part of the problem. We do get information overload. So you really need to curate where are you going to get your information from and stick to that. Because I would imagine you do this, I start learning about something, I'm like, I'll pull from 50,000 resources until I'm like, just overload.
Yeah.
So curate where you're going to get your information from, put a date on the calendar. This is when I'm going to make the decision. And then do not second guess. We are so good at second guessing ourselves.
Yes.
And that's where people end up getting stuck.
Well, and I wanted to jump in with the, so for depending on where you are on the financial spectrum, right? Everyone's budget is very different. Everyone's lifestyle is very different. We're all in different places on our journey, but it really does oftentimes require bringing in help. And that doesn't have to be hiring a coach or hiring a business, analyst or someone to come in and assist. I have friends, fortunately, that are really good. I have resources like you. And sometimes it's just like, can we get on the phone for 2 hours and map this out? Like, let's map it out, the timeline. And then I have one friend, Karen, she's amazing. She's like, okay, what's the date? Put this on the calendar. What's the date we're going to get this done? And you have to sometimes have someone else help you have that dashboard overview, because we can't see through our own stuff. And like exactly what you said with the analysis paralysis stuff, it's like, we'll second guess, we'll hem and haw. It seems very overwhelming. And sometimes it just takes someone else to hold your hand a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
And help talk you through it. Like they don't have your answers, but there's someone to bounce it off of and be like, does this make sense? Am I over analyzing or overthinking? And, it's not like you need someone else's permission, but it can be helpful to have someone else there to sort of like just walk through it together, a partner.
I totally get it. Yes, because I'm creative and I'm like, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to do this. I'm going to make another list. I love making the check the box feature in Trello. I love it.
Right. Yeah. But so I'm encouraging people to to get a lifeline, call a friend, whoever you need to. If you have budget for it, great, hire a professional. If you don't, get your bestie on the phone and be like,
absolutely,
we're going to dive
creative.
into this. Yeah.
Get creative. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. Well, that was the head. Mm-hmm. So now this is the good stuff. And I don't know if I told you this or not, but I am in a spiritual director program.
You did.
I'm learning to be a spiritual director because this is the other component. To me, it was like a natural segue when we're talking about the heart. Mm-hmm. Now, however somebody may frame it, I believe we are spiritual beings having a human existence. Mm-hmm. So if we want to talk in more broad terms of the heart, the existential, we've got a lot of clutter in our hearts. Oh, we've got so much clutter. We've got unresolved trauma. Mm-hmm. We've got childhood wounds. We have got stressors from life. 2020, what a nightmare. Mm-hmm. We have so in it, and we're not processing it because in America, you just put on your happy face and you keep going and
buy more stuff.
Buy more stuff. Right.
Get a storage unit.
Right. Go to your favorite addiction.
Right.
And again, I'm not saying that with any malice or nastiness. No. This is it's an indication of heart clutter.
Yes.
So how do you declutter? How do you unclutter your heart? Well, the pitch box. Let's talk about the pitch. Ditch the toxic relationships. Ditch the job, like you talked about leaving ASU because it was a pressure cooker environment. If you've got a toxic relative that you're obligated to be with, set boundaries around it. I've got some good friends and they know that when her sister comes, she's not going to be there more than 2 days because the husband's like, I'm going to leave if she's here longer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So put boundaries around it. I know you can't ditch all toxic relationships. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're at a job and you can't leave it right now, but for the love of God, put a timeline on it and make some decisions to do something or create some boundaries that you can mitigate the toxicity. And we all know, we've all got them. Every single one of us have got the toxic relationships.
Yes.
Or the toxic environment.
And I mean, again, this is another one of those if we were putting little pins in this conversation, right? This is definitely another one of those where that work can take decades. So by no means by sharing this process, right, are we saying that this is just 1, 2, 3 fits into this and just do the thing, right? Like this can take decades. And I personally, you're coming in with this amazing work to, and I'll talk about this more on the end or do a separate little outro with it, but for Innerspace Camp, which is an 8-week program that I'm going to facilitate in June and July. And the first module of the camp is crystallize, which is crystallize your core values. And that is what helped change. It was a game changer for me. I was in an on again, off again, 12-year toxic. I call it almost like a non-relationship because it wasn't actually, it was just crazy, right? I was in a toxic work environment. I had some toxic behaviors that I was, patterns that I kept repeating and cycles that I was in. It took over. I mean, I'm still obviously a work in progress. We always are, right? But it takes a lot of self-reflection, working with a coach, working with friends, working with a therapist, a minister, a pastor, a spiritual director. You know, there's a lot of layers to it, and there's tons of resources out there. And that's why I was drawn to do this podcast, was to start presenting these resources to people who are interested in doing those deeper, that deeper work and peeling back those deeper layers. So yes, to everything that you're saying, this whole conversation is so incredible because it impacts so many areas of our life. Oh, absolutely. And those relationships and those boundaries. I mean, there's tons of books on boundary work and yes, because those again, everything you're talking about are energy drains. These are all things that drain our energy and don't allow us to have as much energy to put forth into the creative projects, the people we love, the work we want to do, the business we want to create, whatever that is for each individual person, right? We don't have the energy or bandwidth because it's all this other ish.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So the relationship piece is huge. Yes. Yeah.
And you can't understate, this really is the work of a lifetime.
Yes.
I mean, I was kind of whinging to my therapist. It's like, I've been seeing you a long time. And she kind of laughs about that. My spiritual director also too, because I'm like, what's my problem? And they're like, Theresa, every time I go to a continuing ed workshop, everybody is still seeing a therapist.
Yes.
And I mean, if you can do that, great, or a listening ear from a friend can be helpful, because of the background I've had in trauma. Therapy has been very helpful to me, but it's a slow process. It's, it's interesting when I think, all the things that nature teaches us, what we are able to actually see is just a small spectrum of all the whole spectrum. Or with hearing, we only can listen within this range.
Right.
And it's so often this journey that we're doing as we are looking at heart clutter, we're limited. Our perspective is so limited on what we can see. So just becoming aware of things is that's a huge win. And that's part of the necessary process.
Right.
So, but anyway, that's the heart clutter. What do I talk about when it's donating? How do you donate heart clutter? Well, this is back to the work. I'm a really big fan of journaling. Forgiveness is the power tool. Now, and I'm not talking about, your dad beat the shit out of you every day for the first 10 years. I'm not saying, I forgive him and you move on. That's a process that needs to be done and it needs to be honored. And if some of those wounds do need a therapist to help you, because I do not want to sugarcoat this. Back to my Christian background, it was like, you just forgive. And no, you don't just forgive. It's a process, and there needs to be, if somebody is abusing you emotionally or whatever, you don't just, I forgive you and move on. You've got a process to work through. So, but it is this power tool.
Yes.
And it's something that all of the great spiritual teachers teach about forgiveness. But I just want to put a caution there that forgiveness is not this one-time event. It's something that you move forward through and in.
Yes.
Journaling is a great way of doing this. Huge fan of journaling.
Me too.
And other things.
We got to write it down to get it out of our head, right? Whether that's the grocery list or why I'm forgiving person XYZ, right. we have to write it down and get it out here, because that's that clutter in your head. That's what we're talking about. And any coaching program is all, there's always journaling baked into it. And it's because all that is noise in our head, and we have to get it out. Yeah.
Well, and I want to say a plug about this too. It doesn't look like forgiveness, but when you have been hurt and traumatized, let all that out, process it.
Yes.
If you want to journal and draw, some of my journal pages, I tear them up when I'm done, because it's like, I don't want anybody to see.
Yeah.
And then I'll go out and burn it,
rip it up, put it in the toilet, whatever.
I'm done with this. I honor it. I had a lot of rage over this situation. I'm going to give it a voice.
Yes.
And then I'm going to release it, and I'm going to practice. I'm going to choose forgiveness.
Yeah.
So the next thing, how do you relocate heart clutter? Well, we kind of touched upon that already. Boundaries. You've got to have boundaries. Boundaries for, it's so funny, and especially when you care about people, you'll end up taking on other people's crap. And that accumulates. That's going to cost you. That's going to, what you beautifully said earlier, Cami.
Yes.
That's going to take from your energy to do the work that you're put on this earth to do. You don't have the energy for that if you're dealing with other people's stuff. And
that also manifests as those illnesses, like we talked about. Your body physically cannot take all of that stuff. That is part of what I went through too. I was putting everyone before myself, my coworkers, my friends, my family, my community. And I wasn't putting myself first. And I thought I was. I was like, I'm taking care of all the things, but I wasn't taking care of me.
Yeah. And the body's like,
yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah. And just a plug for Gabor Mate's work. I don't know if yes. Right?
Yes.
His is The Body Keeps the Score, right? Or is The Body Says No?
That's Bessel von Kolk.
Yes. The Body Says No.
The Body Says No is Gabor Mate, and In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which is dealing with addictions.
Yes.
Outstanding. Well, that's going to be a great segue for where we're going next.
Let's go.
First, I need to touch on the think about component of the clutter clearing for the heart. Daily practices, in addition to journaling, meditation, prayer, deep breathing, whatever. There's apps out there. I don't care if you're religious or not. This is science-based stuff I'm talking about.
Yes.
By slowing your breathing down, use the Calmly app, use the Calm app, look at the Google Play Store. You will find apps there. I tell clients something as easy as putting your hand over your heart.
Yes.
Taking 4 deep breaths will drop your pulse. It's going to drop your blood pressure. This is really powerful medicine. I think it's so cool that we're wired with these mechanisms for our healing.
Yes.
Our bodies are made to heal. So by using some form of a daily practice, meditation, I have a hard time. You're not going to get me in the lotus position for more than 30 seconds, because I'm like, so what do I do? Well, I go find a labyrinth and I walk the labyrinth slowly, or I go on a mindful walk and maybe I'll pause and study a flower.
Yes.
So you can find a meditation that works for you. Yeah. But I encourage people, it's so important to have some sort of a practice.
Yeah. And so just to jump in with the morning practice stuff, especially in the business coaching world and building a business, there's a lot of hype around morning practices. And that's another area you don't want to shame people, right? Like for me, it doesn't have to be the same thing every day because I'm artistic and creative and I've committed to 30 minutes of movement every day. It doesn't have to be the same thing. It can be yoga one day. I'm into this bar 3, I paid for a yearly membership. It wasn't that expensive. I love it. And I'm moving my body, but some days it's just me stretching on the floor, on the carpet. My dog comes, she stretches with me. Right now it's spring and we're having the windows open. And I love, like you said, meditation, right? I'm the same way. I can't just sit. I'm not there and I may never be there, but for me right now, I'm loving hearing the birds. And so I just deep breathe.
It's a meditation.
And I listen to those birds and it's like, oh my God, spring is happening. It just gets you out of the monkey mind, like you said. And
absolutely.
Nature is still, all the things are still happening. The world is still spinning, right? Even though it feels crazy and chaotic. And, I don't watch the news because I'm not letting any of that stuff into my mind.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole nother time, energy suck, right? But it's like tuning into the birds, moving my body for 30 minutes. Sometimes I journal. I try to do a daily gratitude in the morning where I type it in my phone and then I share it with a gratitude buddy. I don't do it every single day. In my mind, I do, but I don't write it down every single day. I try to, and I committed to it for several months, from like January to March. I was really good about it. So it can look like different things, but it's committing to giving yourself some time first thing in the morning before you give that time to other people. I think that's the important, thing to discern there for people is like, because you're committing to yourself first.
Right.
And it is huge and it is a gift and it opens all of these other things, but it's making that commitment to you first thing in the morning and your connection to whatever source, power,
absolutely.
that you believe in. So
and one of my favorite meditation teacher, mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn, is brilliant. And he talks about it's just about paying attention. You can turn your dishwashing into a meditation.
Yes.
Just pay attention.
Cooking, chopping veggies, right? Like I fell in love with cooking over COVID and I did not like to cook before at all.
Very cool. Yeah.
So,
so learning how to occupy and be present in the moment.
Yeah.
It's huge. So people don't get scared off when I say meditation because we need to take the scariness out of that.
Yes.
It's really nothing more than just being present, being present in the moment. We're always, our little monkey minds are always, we're worried about tomorrow. We're regretting the past.
Right.
Just being, I'm here right now.
Be right here.
All is well.
Yep.
I can breathe and life's good.
Move on. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've already talked about this a little bit. And this is where I get really passionate, a little bit about my story. Developed fibromyalgia when I was 40 years old. And after years of just, if it had a ligament or a tendon or a joint, it had received PT. And it was just getting so ridiculously hard to just function. Got a fibromyalgia diagnosis. I think I was about 40 at that time. And I was so discouraged because my exercise, I've always been very active physically, and what I could do exercise-wise kept shrinking. And, even going for a walk, it's like, okay, I need to do an ice massage on my calf. And it was just orthotics. And then I read a book. And actually, I need to give a little, back in my 30s, I read this book, but it so pissed me off and offended me. I threw it across the room. the book was called Healing Back Pain by Dr. John E. Sarno, a medical doctor from Rusk University. And he worked with a lot of patients, and back pain is just ridiculously
I've had
not
it.
treatable.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's unrelenting.
Yes.
It's
debilitating.
It is. And what they use to treat it should be outlawed because we're talking back surgeries. We're talking single digits healing and pain relief.
Yeah.
It's just, we wouldn't get on an airplane if their safety record was what it looks like for back surgeons.
Right.
But anyway, Dr. Sarno was like, what's going on with this? Why can't we get to the bottom of the back pain and really help people? And he began to notice certain characteristics of these people that were coming in. Number one, these were really nice people. They were nice people. They were hardworking. They were honest. They were sincere. They tried to help other people. So that was one characteristic. The next one, they were under a lot of stress. So, they're raising kids. Maybe they're in the sandwich generation. They're taking care of their parents. So they've got that going on. So we've got the people-pleasing behavior. We've got the current stressors. And then the other one is a history of suppressed what's going on in your subconscious. And Dr. Sarno, and this shocks people, suppressed and repressed emotions.
Yes.
The chief one being rage. And people are like, oh, I'm not an angry person. You know what?
Yeah, it's stuck in your back.
It's
stuck in your back. Yes.
Your back. Yes. Because what's happening, because you are such a nice person.
Yes.
And because anger is not an acceptable emotion. Right. And because we're nice, we swallow it. It's people that develop swallowing issues even.
Yes.
They're swallowing their anger. But here's the thing. This doesn't mean you're bad or you're evil or you're anything. It's just you're human.
Yes.
There's this little thing in you, your ego and your super ego that is like a toddler that needs a nap now.
Yes.
And you need to recognize it. And so what Dr. Sarno did, his approach to healing back pain was to take these three components and then to teach this to the people, give them some inner work. He did some seminars. They were just absolutely brilliant on how to, the main thing, recognizing that there's, he called it, I'm getting ahead of myself here, Cammie, forgive me.
It's okay.
He expanded it more to include things like gastric, esophageal reflux disease, carpal tunnel syndrome, plantar fasciitis, and he called it tension myositis syndrome. And if you remember a little Latin in there, you got tense muscles.
Yes.
And what's happening, your body, because these unacceptable emotions are there, like a new mom who brings a baby home, and it's unacceptable to acknowledge the rage they're feeling because they've been bumped off the throne. Now there's the little screaming human that you brought home. You're no longer, people aren't asking about you. So instead of recognizing that, she develops back pain. Well, of course, it's because of holding the baby. And I'm like, no, there's stuff going on emotionally there. And again, and it's all fine. It's all good. It's just part of the human experience. And so the first thing that Dr. Sarno teaches people is to recognize, and this is after medical tests have been ruled out. I mean, if you're not growing a tumor, you've got an infection going on, if it comes back as, a syndrome, anything with syndrome in it, highly suspect for having an emotional root in it. So Dr. Sarno began working with patients from this basis, and guess what? People were getting healed left and right.
Yes.
They were, I'm talking getting out of wheelchairs. I'm talking about getting their life back. It was so powerful. So read that book back in my 30s. It pissed me off. I threw it across the room because I'd been in a car accident. I had broken vertebrae, and that was what everybody was telling me. Oh, it was from this car accident. When I got the fibromyalgia diagnosis, I knew that I needed to listen. Because even vacuuming was causing problems for me. So I began to look at Dr. Sarno's work and another book by Steve Ozanich called The Great Pain Deception. Excellent book. I began to read that and I began to see myself on every page.
Yes.
My desire to please people, my desire under a lot of stress. We've had our own business most of our years, and that can be really stressful. The parenting, my chaotic childhood had a buttload of trauma. and we've learned more about that with the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which I encourage people to look that up. If you're dealing with, I'll give you the thumbnail on it. They did a study of morbidly obese women at Kaiser Permanente in California, and they put them all on a diet. They all lost weight, and then they gained it back. Mm-hmm. And one of the researcher, one or more of the team, I'm not sure who was doing it, they got curious about it. It was like, well, what is with these women that they can't keep the weight off? So they got curious. There's that curious word again. Asking questions. What's going on here? And they discovered that these women, they had 10 different questions from different areas. Questions like, have you been sexually assaulted? Was there food scarcity in your home? Do you have a loved one in prison? And they looked at these different areas, and the higher the ACE score, the higher the predictor. And I love that because it fits totally in with what Dr. Sarno was teaching. He was a genius. He was an absolute genius. So this study has come out. And when you're seeing people that have got these health issues or morbid obesity, and doctors need to be aware that there's a root for there. It's not because they're not disciplined or because they're lazy or because, they eat too much. I mean, just these unkind. Yes. And I've done it too. I've struggled with my own weight. So I get it, even my own internal dialogue of just nastiness instead of saying, what is at the root of this? Mm-hmm. And this is where I come back to, it's a clutter problem.
Yes.
You've got too much stress.
Unprocessed
stuff going on in your heart.
Yes.
Unprocessed stuff. And the body is going to keep turning up the volume.
Yes.
Every time. But what we end up doing, and because we have industrialized can't even call it healthcare, the whole medical complex, and have turned it into a for-profit formula. Of course, they're going to keep you going for tests. And of course, you can get screened. And of course, they talk about, you're pre-diabetic. And I'm like,
yeah. I called my experience with it the medical mystery tour, right? Because
exactly
there were no answers, and everyone, I know several other women who are in the middle of that, because a lot of times it does show up as the gastro stuff. So then people start to ask me questions, and I'm like, oh, you're at the beginning phase, and we still think the doctors have the answers.
Oh my God, absolutely.
They don't. And that's not to say we shouldn't work with them and get those tests and do that process.
Right.
We need to do that process and all of our inner work and our inner exploration and our inner inquiry and all of the things we've talked about today. It's all tied together. Yes.
Absolutely. And I cannot emphasize that enough. Yes. Rule out anything physical going on.
For sure. Yeah.
If you're going back to your doctor appointment and they're like, oh, there's nothing going wrong, it must just be whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yeah, that's mind body then. That is tension myositis syndrome.
Yes, yes.
And you need to approach this, but we're so compartmentalized. I mean, you got something wrong with your finger, you go to the finger doctor. You got something with your eyelash, you go to, it's so ridiculous, and nobody's tying this together.
Yes.
And I don't know about you, but I did have one doctor who was very intuitive and an amazing man. Miss him still. He's my doctor in Montana. Most doctors, they're not going to ask about your childhood. They're not going to say, hey,
and they don't have time. The system's not designed for them to be that person.
Exactly. Yeah. The insurance is driving. Yes. Oh, you've got exactly 7.5 minutes with this person.
Yes.
And cranking them out, so that's a whole other discussion.
Yes. Right? Yeah. I know. And I want to be mindful of our time. So we have about, 10 or 15 more minutes. So I don't know how far into your process you are and how
that's it.
Oh,
that's it.
We got there.
That's the deal with your clutter. If you got health issues, look at what type of clutter might be driving your health issues.
Yes. And I love that. There's so much here, right? Like I'm excited to pull you into the Innerspace Camp experience, because this layer of it, putting the crystallize and our core values first, this whole thing is a process. Yeah, it's not a one size fits all. Back to what you were saying about the emotions and the anger, specifically targeting back pain and or fibromyalgia, the stomach and all the gut stuff is also tied in with that. And same back to the good girl, perfectionist, overachiever. Anger is definitely something I did not want to express. I did not feel safe expressing my anger because you're not supposed to be angry. I've had people through the years call me me obnoxiously optimistic. And I'm sure there are some people who maybe don't know me and the full experience that I've been going through in the last, handful of years would say even toxic positivity, right? Now I understand and appreciate that life is a full spectrum sport.
Yes.
We have to look at our anger. We have to look at our rage.
Yes.
Especially women as we get to a certain age and our hormones start shifting.
Yep.
That little rage monster, little dragon on our shoulder isn't going away. It's just amplifying, right? And it shows up in the silliest things, like in the car or at the grocery store.
I was just going to say that. When you're a nice person and they turn into this demon, and they totally lose their shit at the stoplight.
Ourselves, right? Like I do this. For me, what happens, and I know it's hormone related because I can see the sync in the month and the timing, right? I start to get clumsy and drop stuff. I still don't know medically how that ties together, but it's a thing, right? It's a real thing. It's like I'll fill my water glass and then drop it on the floor and there's water all over it, right? And it's like, it's a water glass, it's water. It's not going to stain anything. It's not going to hurt anything. It's going to dry up, right? But then you're like, oh, I dropped this water, right? It's like, why am I freaking out about dropping some water? But then it's like, I get clumsy and I start dropping stuff, or I'll trip over stuff. And I'm like, I still don't know what that is that causes that, but it's a thing. And then, so it's those little tiny things, right? Or it's like your computer, you go to launch it and then it crashes and you got to reboot. Right. And of course, it's 2 seconds before you're supposed to be on a Zoom call. And you're just like, it's like the little things for me that want to set me over the edge. It's not like these big things, chaotic events I can handle, but these little tiny micro things, oh my God, you would think the world was melting down.
I know. Yeah, no, it's like a toddler needing a nap. I mean, we do the same damn thing. Yes. Or the other thing, I was telling a lady this the other day, anytime you find yourself getting triggered by somebody's behavior, by what they're saying, whatever, it's like,
yeah.
You got the same thing in you, honey.
Turn that mirror right around.
And then I said, and the more vehement you are about, I would never do that. I would never. It's like, tell me more. Yes. You've just touched upon your shadow. Yeah. And again,
I did an episode on shadow work. So yes, there is so much of that to do.
It's not anything to shame.
No.
It's something that needs to be healed and loved. Yes. And I know that sounds very Pollyannish, but the more I do this work and the more I see people that do get free, it's love and self-compassion that helps people unclutter their closet, unclutter their head, their heart, and heal physically.
And quite honestly, something that we didn't mention or use the phrase inner child work, right? But the shadow work and the inner child work and everything that you're talking about in the work that you do is, I mean, if you imagine when you said a client opens the door and wants to sneak out and not let you see the things, it's that inner child inside that is terrified that you're going to judge or look or shame or, all of the things, right? And so it is that inner child within us that just wants to be loved or held or all the things that we each individually didn't get or got too much of or whatever that story and history is, the intergenerational stuff that we talked about. So there's so many layers to all of it. And I'm so honored that you're in my pool of resources to help expose and share to other people that if they need to look at some of these things, that you're a resource that they can go to. And so on your website, do you have a newsletter that you offer? How can people stay in touch, connected with you? I know you're still building things.
Oh my, yeah.
Yes.
I send out a very occasional newsletter. They can reach out to me. I've got a Facebook group, Unclutter Your Life with the Zany Sage. Mm-hmm. I have a newspaper column in Prescott E-News. If any of the listeners you can look at that from anywhere.
Yes.
Reach out to me via email. I send out very occasional email newsletters.
And so you do one-on-one and group programs. Yes.
I'm going to start the group program again. But I do one-on-one coaching. I still do organizing work. I'm working in the Scottsdale area. I'm going to be going up to Prescott and doing some work later this month. So somebody's in Prescott, I can make that happen.
So primarily Arizona-based for physical.
Arizona-based, yeah.
Do you do any Zoom kind of calls or Zoom?
I've tried to do that, especially during COVID, to do virtual
Probably
organizing.
Tricky.
You know what? It's a different kettle of fish, and it's like, I'll do this and I'll do that. It's like, no, I need to fix one thing and focus on that. So,
yes. And you have your book as well.
I do have a book. It's on Amazon. Yeah, on uncluttering or badass organizing. Mm-hmm. I'm probably going to work on my next book. I'm toying with the title of "Deal with Your Shit."
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. Yes. Obviously, what are we talking about here? So
yes. So we will put all of these links in the show notes. I'll make sure to get all the links from you. You and I discussed a lot of books, so I want to make sure you and I touch base and follow up on all that. I'll put all of those links and resources in the show notes.
Awesome.
Because I think it's important just to share, we never know where this conversation sparks the healing to begin in other people, right? They may pick up one of the books. They may go to YouTube. I know all of these doctors. Gabor Mate has hundreds of videos on YouTube with pieces and parts of different seminars. That he's done. So all of these people are out there. And if this can be a catalyst, to pull that Band-Aid off for someone to start diving in. And the show is called the Innerspace, Cosmix Innerspace podcast, because it's that inner work. It's our inner space that we have to look at first. We always want to look outside of ourselves, but really it's inside of ourselves that we need to dive deep and do that inquiry work and ask those questions, get curious. So that we can just live more holistically and honor the full spectrum of our emotions and our experiences, and that there is no shame in any of it, right? Look at us. We just put a bow on it.
Whoa, yeah, whoa. We've been to church today.
Right? Amen. It's Sunday. I should maybe start recording more of these on Sunday. There's a little extra that's coming through, right?
Like the Cami Souls, Oprah has her Super Soul Sunday, so it's kind of the same idea.
It's our Cosmix Innerspace tea, right? We're getting the medicine. Right. We're getting the medicine. It's coming through, and I so appreciate you and who you are and what you bring to the world. And I'm excited to share you here on the podcast. I'm excited to share you in Innerspace Camp, and I'll put a little extra on the end after you and I are on. So we'll make sure to let people know when you're coming to play with us in June and July.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, thank you so much, Cami. It's always a delight to visit with you. Yeah. Always.
Same here. I love that you were here, and I'll be talking to you soon.
That sounds awesome.
All right. Thanks, Theresa.
Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you so much for sharing your time and space with me today and for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the Cosmix Innerspace podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or share this episode with a friend. Shout out to our amazing sound editor and producer extraordinaire, Brendan Shanahan. The Cosmix Innerspace podcast is proudly produced by the Podcast Pro Shop. I'd love to stay connected with you. I'm at CamiKDotCom on Instagram and Facebook, and I share a lot more Cosmix goodness on Instagram stories. And of course, we can always stay connected via the Cosmix Innerspace Mothership over on the blog at CamiK.com, where you can find ways to work with me, stay tuned for new art and inner space support in the KK shop, and subscribe to the Cosmix e-news to stay updated for future programs.